Welcome back to In the Know. We are talking about chocolate and why it's actually good for us. And joining us today is our local expert, chocolatier and chocolate expert, Patrick Hay from Everything Chocolate. We actually have a call. We have Amanda on the line from Newmarket. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, how are you today?
We're doing well, thanks. How are you?
Great, thank you. I'm thoroughly enjoying this.
Excellent. Me too. It's very tasty. I wish you could taste it.
Me too.
Do you have a question for Patrick?
I do. I'm really curious because I like around the 70% mark, but I've noticed there's some bars that are like $5 and some bars are $12. So at what price can I tell that it's a half decent bar and what I'm getting is good quality?
Buy the $12 bar. No, just buy the best you can afford, because usually we find that the ingredients that go into it, as we talked about the different types of beans, if they're putting more care into putting the type of bean on the label, you like to think they're putting more care into the ingredients that they're putting in, and you're going to get a better product. That's not always the case. There's a lot of fancy packaging out there, a lot of misconceptions. They look good on the outside, but the quality is not good. I always encourage people to taste the chocolate, because that way at least you know that, yeah, you know what, it might be a little bit more, but I like it. There's really good, inexpensive chocolate. Read your labels, and you have to taste. So if the $12 bar is overpriced in a fancy store, or a really good all-round bar at a general store, you might find you're happy with both.
And we talked about that during the break, because I was fancying the dark chocolate, and we said, you know, I might be fine with just a little square of this, whereas the milk chocolate, which is cheaper, I would probably eat more of.
Because the higher sugar, and your body kind of reacts to the sugars, and we want more. With the darker chocolate, it's going to linger on your palate, so even though you're paying a little bit more for it, you don't eat as much, and that bar should last you a week.
It'll last you longer.
Yeah, well, we always have some in the cupboard, and after dinner, that's our dessert. We have a square or two, maybe three. But what you have to look at too, if your typical candy bar, if you are spending $1.50 on a candy bar, and it's 40 grams, well, if you do the math, that candy bar is costing you $4.
Right.
And it's basically sugar and oil. So to buy a decent bar, and the ranges go, we do carry, you know, lower price bars that are of good quality. They're not using the best beans, but it's a good bar for that price range. And that's important for a lot of people that, you know, my budget's a little bit limited.
Right.
Cars the same. I mean, there's good cars for less money, bang for your buck. But again, ultimately, you have to like it.
Perfect. Okay, so before the break, we talked about misconceptions, consumer misconceptions with chocolate, because you could buy chocolate virtually anywhere.
Yeah, a lot of people look at things, it's brown, it's sweet, it's got to be chocolate. Not really. It goes back to what they're putting into it. We talked about a lot of things earlier, even when it comes to truffles, that you've got to read your labels. We talked about the cocoa liqueur, cocoa butter, cocoa mass. When you get into something like this, it says it's truffles, it's a product of Belgium. In the fine print, I don't know if you can see that on there.
It says candy.
Candy. So legally, they can't
right
call it...
there. Let's see who's got it. Right under here, teeny tiny.
It says candy.
It says candy.
They can't call it chocolate unless it has a minimum, in North America, minimum 20% cocoa solids. Europe, it's 25%. They're trying to push that higher. So it has to, this has less than 20% cocoa solids. But also, if you start looking at your ingredient list, the first ingredient is vegetable oil. So, and then sugar. So, what do you...
And it's confusing because people see truffles and they're thinking,
this is a truffle. A truffle needs to be made with fresh cream. And the only thing that gives it is the name. It tried to emulate the mushroom truffle, so it's cocoa dusted on the outside to emulate the mushroom truffle. That's where the name came from. But a truffle should be made with fresh cream and chocolate. And that's basically it. And in a simple form recipe, it's 50% heavy cream, 50% chocolate. You melt that down at the right temperature, and that's your truffle. If you've got hydrogenated oils and fats and sugars and artificial flavors, be aware, read your labels.
And that's the chocolate, or candy, I should say, that's not good for you.
Yeah, and like I say, typical candy bars on the market right now, and there's a big push to say, unless it has that 20%, they have to call it either candy bar or confection bar. So when you're buying your chocolate, make sure it's a chocolate bar and not a candy or confection bar.
Right. What about a bag like this?
Same idea. We call them truffles, but again, we have to, you know, if you read your label on what they are, and your labels are on the back as well. If we look at our ingredient list down here, sugar is the first ingredient, so you know it's going to be sweet. The second ingredient is hydrogenated vegetable
Let's
oil.
see if I
and
don't know
palm
if you
kernel
can
oil.
quite see it because it is teeny tiny, but yeah, there you go. So first ingredient is sugar, coconut oil, palm oil,
Okay.
right there.
So to me, it's not chocolate because there's no cocoa butter, no cocoa liqueur. If it is, it's further down on the label. So the more ingredients to put in front of that, the cheaper the chocolate's going to be, and the worse it's going to be for you. It's those vegetable fats. If people are using chocolate, and we mentioned chocolate's good for you, we talk about dark chocolate, 70% or higher, where you've cut out most of the sugars, but also the vegetable fats is what we want to avoid. And moderation, let that be known. Moderation is the key. You can't eat, oh, it's 85%. I can eat a lot of it.
Right.
Still, you're only going a square, maybe two. You don't want to eat the whole bar. And you'll find a good chocolate is very rich. You don't need a whole bar.
Right.
You'll find you're satisfied with a little bit. Trends in chocolate, what we've noticed is a lot of people, when they entertain, they have people over for dinner, instead of having like a heavy cheesecake or heavy desserts, we're finding people come in and they'll buy 2 or 3 of their favorite bars, and they break that up.
Right.
2 things it does, it's very light, it's good for you. Also, it allows you to interact.
It's very social.
It is. You know, if you're eating cake, you're eating cake. Chocolate, you can have a piece, you can share it with your friends, we can talk about it. It doesn't interrupt, and it's not heavy after a meal. And you'll find you're satisfied.
And because it's very much like wine or cheese, you can...
Very much.
What does it taste like to you, Patrick? Well, this is what it tastes like to me, and talk about the tones on your palate and
Yeah.
everything.
And
then you could be a chocolate snob.
Well, people talk about pairings too, and there's another thing, and what I always encourage people, find a chocolate you like, find a wine you like, and see how it works. There's a lot of cross-marketing that goes on, so one company might sort of link up with a wine company,
Right.
pair them together for you, and it could work. But again, if you don't like that particular wine, if you don't like that particular chocolate, you don't like milk, you don't like dark, you have to sort of find what suits you. And I encourage people to try.
Experiment with your food.
And experiment with flavors. I mean, there's so much you can do. I mean, a lot of companies are introducing flavors for us, but if you're doing stuff by yourself, try a combination, see how it works, you know?
Perfect. All right, we're going to take a short break. We've got a call on the line, so just hold that line, and we'll be right back with more In the Know and more chocolate.